I got a lot of requests to talk about Fernandes and the Floyd Rose relationship. And it gets really crazy because Floyd Rose basically never talks about it in any interviews I've ever seen. And most of the information I got is from the Fernandes catalogs and a guy named Mr. Kakawa who worked in Fernandes in the early 80s in sales, who I thought he was dead, but he's actually alive. And I got a hold of him, and he told me some very interesting things, and it relates to basically got started in cloning this FRT1. All right, so you guys got to remember this is before Kramer. Obviously, when Floyd Rose parted with Kramer, they changed everything. They started a huge empire. Floyd Rose became a millionaire. Kramer was doing well, and then also Floyd Rose is still here today because Eddie Van Halen, the whole connection, and the rest is history. This is before that. Before Kramer, actually, some of it takes place during Kramer as well in the beginning, and that gets really interesting. That's why you probably want to watch most of this video. All right, so before Kramer, you guys got to remember that Floyd Rose was getting turned down by like all these guitar companies. Fender turned him down. Gibson turned him down. All these places didn't want anything to do with them. They thought the Floyd Rose design was stupid, and that was that, which is ironic because Eddie Van Halen was playing the FRT1 as Bumblebee, which I think is kind of funny. Anyway, so everyone was not giving him a chance until Fernandes came and they said, hey, we can make this for you. Now, this is all according to a guy named Mr. Kakawa, and he said it wasn't 100% sure if his memory's kind of hazy. So keep this in mind. And I also kind of after he told me this, I connected some dots as well. All right, so it came down to FRT1. So this was the trem that was on the Bumblebee, Van Halen 2 Bumblebee guitar. Van Halen played it on all his guitars in the 1980, 1981, right? The Frank Strat Rude guitar. And as you guys know, Fernandes and a lot of these Japanese makers are experts at cloning everything, right? Fenders, Gibson, all that stuff. Something I got to point out that's extremely important, and this is for a lot of the Japanese companies. Fernandes never made anything. They were a marketing company, okay? And they subcontract out to other companies to make all this stuff. So when I say Fernandes made this, they didn't technically make it. They subcontracted out, according to Mr. Kakawa, some factory in Kyoto, Japan, but he wasn't sure. And later on, it might have been Takeuchi in like the mid-'80s, but he's not sure. So some metal shop factory in Japan, in Kyoto, probably made these early Floyd Roses. Okay? So because Fernandes, they make all their money cloning everything, right? Supposedly, and this is my prediction, is that they got a hold of an FRT1 and they cloned it. And Mr. Kakawa said that they showed Floyd Rose at a NAMM show and impressed him, and that's what kind of started the contract. And my prediction is the USA versions were like 1979, and Fernandes didn't start making these until like second half of 1981. So my guess is they met him at the 1981 NAMM show in January, in the winter. They showed it to him, and Floyd Rose, they decided to do a contract from there, okay? And that's got the ball rolling, and then they started producing the FRT3s in Japan while Floyd Rose was still doing all this stuff. And then they also made the FRT4s and FRT5s. And I heard that the Japanese actually played a role in helping design the FRT4 and 5, according to people from Japan, which is kind of interesting. So, like, Fernandes Japan, supposedly they had really smart guys at the metal shop, and they kind of co-developed possibly some stuff with Floyd Rose, but we'll never know. It's just what some Japanese people told me. So the Fernandes factories that they contracted out, in a way, they played a huge role in the development of the future Floyd Roses, possibly. Okay, so that happened from 1981 to like 1983. Now, in 1983, the Kramer deal happened, obviously. And I don't know why Kramer decided to go with Schaller. I'm not really sure. Some people told me it's some kind of chromium. They were able to get away with more stuff with chromium production. I don't know. But I think Kramer said, look, we don't want to go with Fernandes. We want to go with, Schaller to make them. You got to remember, Fernandes was also putting them on all their guitars, too. And there's actually a lot of rare models in Japan that you couldn't get in the United States. And actually, so that's something really interesting to keep in mind. But anyway, the Kramer deal happened. They said, no, we're not using Fernandes. And this, like, they got Eddie Van Halen, and the Kramer thing is the rest is history. But really interesting. And it must have been because Fernandes was still contracted with Floyd Rose to like make the official Floyd Roses. And according to Mr. Kakawa, so when this Kramer deal happened, I guess Fernandes didn't really know about it at first, and when they found out, they're like, "What the hell is going on? They are Kramer or Schaller's making this." Like, it was really interesting according to what he was saying. He said it created a lot of buzz at the Fernandes shop when they heard that Kramer and Schaller were partnered up with that, but they were still making their own thing. So here's what's really crazy. So this is like 1983 to 1985. Now, you probably don't know about this if you were in America, because obviously Kramer, you could actually buy the Floyd Roses separately in like 1984, and you're not going to find the Japanese stuff in America, really, right? Now, because Fernandes, they contracted with Floyd Rose, they actually sold the Schaller German-made Floyd Roses in Japan as well. And by the way, guys, check out the Fernandes. This is all explained on Vintage Floyd Rose. Check out the Fernandes 1985 license page, FRT 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 page. Very important. So here's a little fun fact. So the original Floyd Rose and Kramer, the Fernandes actually wanted to undercut that. So they made this supposedly like one of the very first FRT 5 designs ever made, which was this one, had this embossed logo, supposedly super rarely made like a brief moment of time. And these are too costly to produce. They're making them, and they're like, man, we can't make this. We gotta make sure we sell our own official Floyd Rose in Japan to undercut the Schaller one. So what they did is made this thing, and they named it the FRT 7. And they sold these in about 1984, I think, for like 1 year, maybe 2 years, a little bit in 1985. It's the craziest thing. So you get the Schaller German Floyd Rose, and you got the Japanese Fernandes official Floyd Roses. They're both official Floyd Roses. This one you could only find in Japan. It's domestic in Japan only. So Fernandes was selling the Schaller German Floyd Roses, but yet they're also selling their own and competing against it. So like there were two official Floyd Rose models in Japan, and they were competing against each other. This one like undercutted the other one by like $20 or $30, so more people bought it, right? They were able to cheapen it up from that first one, the one with the embossed logo, because they made the sustain block a little cheaper, but the base plate is like really thick and rock solid. So that's a little fun fact. And now in the 1980. Now, this was 1985 still, I supposedly, and Floyd Rose, like, by 1985, 84, even, you had to start licensing stuff, but Fernandes didn't have to because they were technically must have been contracted to make the FRT 7 in domestic only. You didn't see this one in America at all. Really crazy. And then, like, must have been 1985 sometime, like, then the contract must have expired or something, right? And then Floyd Rose say, hey, you got to license it, and now I'm working with Schaller, Germany, and Kramer. And then Fernandes actually made, it's basically it's the same thing as this FRT 7, but they called it the Head Crasher series, which in my opinion might have been the best licensed Floyd Rose ever, because like it was just like this, but you could actually adjust the saddle height, which is really cool. And that's it. So that was like the really short Fernandes history. So from like 1981 to 1985, right around there, they basically cloned the FRT1, impressed Floyd Rose, made a contract with him. They helped design a lot of the early stuff, and really the very first Floyd Roses produced and available were in Fernandes, Japan. Then the Kramer deal struck with Schaller, Germany, and they're like, what the hell? But they still had the contract until like 1984, 1985 to produce official Floyd Roses. And they did that until like 1985, and then they had to license out, and that was it. So that's a kind of really extremely short, interesting history on Fernandes, Japan, and Floyd Rose.